And we're recording.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. Um, okay, so my name is Andy Goldberg. I'm an independent casino analytics and technology consultant. My company's name is Centerfield 9, website cf9.com. And I've been using Python for about 8 or 9 years. I first was introduced to it when I was looking to build a backend server for a mobile app, a mobile app that I was building at the time, and needed something, to run the API. So I learned about Flask, which basically delivered on its promises of being easy to learn, easy to set up, and all of that. And obviously from there, I was learning Python and, recognized how great the standard library was, the tons of open source packages, all the ecosystem that was starting to grow related to data visualization and analytics. And that's right up my alley. So it was a great fit. Before I get going, I do want to say thanks to Adam. You were just talking briefly, but I know there's a ton of logistics that go into running a group like this. I've tried to start a group, and it's very difficult to constantly have topics every single month and to keep people engaged. So I appreciate you doing that, giving me a platform to be able to speak. And so definitely, I know there's a ton of work behind the scenes that nobody sees, and it's not unappreciated. So thanks. So earlier this year, right before like January and February, if you can remember, before COVID, HBO ran this documentary called McMillions, which was about the monopoly promotion that McDonald's runs every year. So it turned out, and this is a real life story, it turned out that the game was rigged for years, whereas one individual had access to all the super valuable pieces worth $1 million, worth new cars, all the big prizes. And he was basically handing these pieces to his family, his friends, associates in return for a piece of the prize money. So the FBI was tipped off. They did a whole investigation. It was really interesting how they sort of entrapped these people who thought they were smarter than everybody else and got to the heart of it. So if you haven't seen that, it's definitely worth checking out. It's very interesting. But it inspired me. Here's a copy of the McDonald's, the Monopoly game board. If you're not familiar with how it works, the idea is you go to McDonald's, when you order a cheeseburger or fries, you collect these game pieces. And when you collect all the game pieces of a certain color, you win the prize that's associated with it. So it's pretty simple, pretty popular. It brings people back to the restaurant because, hey, I have two, I need to get that third and I can win this big prize. So people make extra trips to McDonald's during the promotional period, and they've launched it in multiple countries and things like that. So anyway, this documentary inspired me because a few years ago, I was working at a casino which decided to build a promotion just like this one. And it's pretty difficult for a casino to run a really good promotion that spans multiple days or multiple weeks. There's a lot of disadvantages. You can have things where people qualify up until the end, but then there's no prizes in the meantime. The cool thing about this particular game is that there's lots of prizes every single day being given out. Lots of customers can play at their own pace, and whatever level of gambling activity they're comfortable with, they can still participate. People know how to play because they've seen it at McDonald's. And we also, as a casino, we're seeking a promotional game that would get people to make extra trips. So, and we thought this would be a good candidate to do that. One tweak that we made was to give the grand prize to the first person who would collect every single piece on the board. That's a little bit different. The $1 million prize that McDonald's has, they restrict it by having just one single piece in the whole country. So they print out, something like 500 million pieces distributed across all their restaurants in the whole country, and one person gets that boardwalk piece and wins $1 million. We didn't like that because it's random. It's just as likely that someone's going to win it on the first day as the last day, right? But once the grand prize is given out, it sort of lets the air out of the balloon a little bit, and it's not as exciting. We thought with this change that we could pretty much engineer the game so that nobody would be able to collect all the pieces until very close to the end of the game. And at the same time, it'd be like a race to do it, and there was a lot of excitement around that. And we thought it was a pretty good idea, and it turned out to be a smart move. So the marketing team was on board. We sold it to senior management, and they thought, yeah, this sounds like a pretty good idea. Let's go for it. The problem was, again, it was just an idea at this point, right? There was no roadmap for, how do you construct a game like this, right? We hadn't done it before, and there's so many variables. We need to know what prize amounts we should have. We need to know how many game pieces to print out to make available. We had to sort of, like I said, we wanted to engineer the game so that the grand prize was won close to the end. So there's a lot of questions that we didn't know the answers for. So that's when they sort of turned to me, or I guess I kind of volunteered and said, hey, before you go to like some outside consultant or something like that, I think we could build a model that would simulate the game, and we could do it all in-house. We could get a model that's going to basically tell us what all the answers to those questions are, and we can set the game up with different configurations, basically see what the results are and find one that works. And you use the terminology is doing a Monte Carlo simulation, where you build a model, you run it millions of times, and you're looking at the distribution of the outcomes to see either the average of the outcomes or how often does some event happen. So the idea is good. And if you can build an accurate model, everything's going to be great. Your budget, your prize allocations are going to meet your budget, and everyone's going to be happy. But you do risk getting the model wrong. The model tells you one thing, and then reality is something different. And it could go wrong in two ways. You could underestimate the odds of winning, and now you are giving away way more prizes than you anticipated. And you might even get into what's called a positive expected value situation, where people can actually profit by playing your game. Like the value of the promotion is worth more than the gambling losses. That's essentially like well, it's kind of like how card counting works. But in today's world with social media, if you do get into an EV situation, and that has happened to other casinos, you're in real trouble, because instead of one person figuring it out, they're going to tweet about it, and next thing you know, you have 1,000 people at your casino taking advantage of you, which is a bad place to be. The opposite is to build a model that overestimates the odds of winning, and now you are not giving away the prize that you thought you were. No one's going to win the grand prize. People feel ripped off, cheated. Another not good situation. So when we build a model for this game, we have to think about, well, what are the inputs? What are we trying to simulate here? And what are what are the outputs? What are we solving for, right? So there's the number of players who are going to participate and the number of game pieces that they're going to earn. There's the probability of picking each piece and the value of the individual prizes, right? The simulation itself really is just the random picking of game pieces and seeing what combinations were made. The good thing about this from a model building standpoint is that it's basically 100% deterministic, right? Once I know what pieces you have, I can just calculate your prize amount. There's no player decisions to be made. There's no option to, double or nothing, or, take door number one or door number two. None of that is involved. If they were, that would make for a much more complicated model. But the fact that there isn't makes this something that we can simulate rather easily, actually. So we're solving for what is going to be the total cost of all the prizes and how likely is that to match our budget, and how likely is someone going to win the grand prize within the period of the game and not force us to go to some sort of draw off or second chance drawing after the fact, which we don't want to happen. So instead of just running the simulation one time, like with certain inputs, and then you get the outputs, we already have targets. We know what the budget is for the prizes, and we know what the probability of finding a grand prize winner ought to be, which is 1. So what we're actually doing is updating all the inputs. We can change the game configuration until we find outputs that match our target. So it's basically an iteration where we're going to keep running the Monte Carlo simulation until we find a game configuration that works. Ideally, we might get 2 or 3 that works, and then, as a marketing team, we can decide what we prefer in terms of bigger prizes that are less frequent or smaller prizes that are more frequent. Right. Yes, this is. So, got it. Okay, so the whole simulation is done in a single Jupyter notebook. You can see when we start out here that there's no NumPy and there's no pandas. There's not a lot of complex math. There's no complex math. And we can hold all of our results in just standard lists and dictionaries. We don't need, a data frame. I'm sure someone else who was doing this might use them, and that's fine, but I didn't think they were necessary. We're going to set the number of simulations at 5,000. It runs very quickly. In fact, I'm going to run the whole thing right now. And so when we get down to some of the results, like I said, this is running totally randomly, and it'll be the first time I'm seeing these particular results, same time you guys are. So right here is where this is the entirety of the game configuration, is in this cell. We just use a single dictionary with a few nested areas to define our color groups, okay? So for the purposes of this example, we're going to have a game that has 3 color groups, that has 2 instant prizes, and that runs for 7 days with a maximum of 3 game pieces that a player can earn each day. And we're going to assume a marketing budget of $300,000. It's simpler than the actual game was, but just by having fewer objects, that's all. Same parameters and everything. So basically, just like Monopoly uses street names, we're going to do the same thing. So we set up these groups. So the New York group is worth $50. It has 3 streets. These ratios determine the frequency of the game pieces. So in other words, there are going to be half as many Broadway pieces in our drum than the other 2. And so it's twice as difficult to get. And we do the same for Las Vegas for $100 and Los Angeles for $200. We have 2 instant prizes, which basically are the same as color groups. They just have only a single street as opposed to 3. So as soon as you get that ticket, you've already completed it. But we don't have to create a new dictionary to handle these instant prizes. We made one other tweak, which was to offer people who got 3 of the same piece a small, like sort of consolation prize, because there's nothing more frustrating when you're trying to complete a group or complete the board than getting a piece that you've already gotten. So when you get 3 of a kind, as soon as you get the second one, now you're only 1 away from at least getting a 3 of a kind and winning at least something. So we try to reduce the customer, frustration by offering a prize there. So we define the grand prize at $50,000, and then we call this the not grand prize, meaning you completed the board, you just weren't the first person to do it. And so we're going to give you $2,500 to keep you motivated. So when you hear that someone else won the 50,000, we don't want you to immediately, give up and leave. So we still have a little something that's pretty valuable for people who invested a lot in the game. Yeah, so this stuff up here is the stuff that I sort of explained during the presentation part. So right here is the, I guess, most vulnerable part of our model, right? We're trying to assess or predict how many people are going to earn how many game pieces, right? So like I said, our example here is going to be a 7-day game with a max of 3 pieces. So the most that someone can earn if they come every single day is 21 pieces, and we expect about 40 players to earn all 21. I'm guessing maybe 1,000 will get 1 piece, 600 will get 2, et cetera, et cetera. The numbers go down as the piece counts go up. And again, like I said, this is where the model is the most vulnerable to what I talked in the presentation part about being too optimistic or too pessimistic and getting the prize amounts wrong, because we're hoping to get a boost in our visitation due to the promotion, but we don't know if it's going to be 5%, 10%, 20%, if the customers really love it. All we can do is rely on our historical data to assess and to bucket these players into groups and take our best guess. But again, if the model is going to be inaccurate, this is the most likely place. And so getting these numbers correct, that's sort of like whole nother process that goes beyond the scope of just talking about this today. But again, it's just mainly looking through your database and being intelligent about what you think the players are going to do. But again, there's no way to test it ahead of time or anything like that. Got it. So I'm going to be going through the code a little bit quickly here, and I apologize. I just want to say, like, anyone who has any questions about the code or wants to go into it, or why do we do this one way or another way, I'm more than happy to answer those questions at the end or offline. I just don't want to like slow the whole thing down about like some technical issue or something like that. But we use a lot of list comprehensions, a lot of which are nested, and admittedly, they're very tricky to sort of mentally process what's going on. And that goes while I was writing this code as well. You can use for loops, which probably are easier to comprehend, but they're more verbose. You could use map and reduce, things like that. But anyway, we're just going to take the configuration from above and create some objects and lists that will be for easy access later. We create a dictionary with the group names, each of which has a list of the pieces in that group. Here's a flat list of all the pieces. Again, because like up here, they're like nested 2 or 3 levels deep. Here's a flat list of all the pieces that are eligible for that 3 of a kind. So we just exclude the instant prizes. And then this is going to be the source of our random function in a second. We have a flat dictionary where the keys are the street names and the values are their ratios, the frequency ratios of how likely they are to be picked. Okay, so we create something to hold our results. And basically now what we're going to do is loop through, like I said, the possibility of game pieces ranges from 1 to 21. So we're going to loop from 1 to 21, and we defined above 5,000 simulations. So for each loop, we're going to do 5,000 simulated random draws of all the pieces. And this random choices function, which is part of the standard library, is like a godsend because it's perfectly aligned to exactly what we want to do. If I was using a language that only could pick, say, random integers, I would somehow have to map or any random number. I'd somehow have to map the numbers to the pieces, and it'd be fine. We could do it, but it would be a little complicated. This particular function does exactly what we want to do. It tells us what's the population. Okay, all the possible results are these piece names. What are the weights? Well, that's our ratios. And then K, how many pieces? And like I said, we're going to loop through. So the first time we do it, it's going to be one piece. Then it's going to be two pieces all the way up to 21. And then how many times are we doing it? 5,000. So basically, we're going to get a 5,000 element list. Each element is a list itself. Yeah. Everything beyond this is just calculations, right? So again, like this one function is essentially the core of the simulation, and then that's it. Everything else is just calculating. We calculate how many pieces were selected for each player, what were the prizes that they collected from completing the groups, what were the prizes they collected from getting 3 of a kind. Let's combine that into a tuple so we can add them up, and then we create a Boolean value for whether or not they covered the entire board. Okay, I'm going to go through this in a second because we print some of the results to the console because that's very important. This is how I was like debugging the code itself, is walking through this. This is the code to do the prints. And then what we're going to do is once we have calculated each of the individual 5,000 simulations, we're going to calculate what was the average prize value, what was the expected cost for the entire group, which is the average price times the number of players, and then what's the probability of covering the entire board. Because again, we want to get one winner before this is all said and done, okay? We take the final results, put a little dictionary object, and then we're going to have the entirety of our results. So it's just like looping through and collecting all the results. So, okay, I know I talked pretty fast here and went through this quickly. So let me, this will show you exactly what's going on. So in the console here, we printed out the first 10 simulations out of 5,000 of people who had 8 pieces. So we have a list here of 10 lists. So this, what I've highlighted, represents the first player. And in other words, they earned 8 pieces, and this is what they got. And I'm looking at it just like you guys are, and I see 1, 2, 3 Fremont Streets. So they're going to get a prize for getting 3 of a kind of those. They got a Michigan Avenue, which is an instant prize, a Bourbon Street, which is instant prize, but they didn't get any other, they didn't complete any color groups. Here's the second person. Also no color groups. Nope. This guy's got a Michigan Avenue. He got Broadway, he got Wall Street. So he got 2, but he didn't get the third. So we look at the third person. And again, instant prizes, but no color groups, huh? That's kind of a little weird. Oh, wait. No, even this one doesn't either. Anyway, that's randomness for you, right? Sometimes you get like good results. People are getting lucky and they make lots of combinations. Other times people don't. So we're going to go step by step. We're going to like walk through. And this is how, again, using this while I'm writing the code and also validating the code. So for each person, we're going to put the pieces, we're going to put the counts of the pieces into the groups. So you can see this first player, he completed the Chicago and the New Orleans, but he didn't complete any of the cities, any of the, the other groups of 3. Okay, here's somebody who completed like the New York group, another person who completed the New York group. Nobody get, okay, none of these people got LA, and none of these people got Las Vegas either, which is interesting. Okay, but we can assign this person will have won the $50 prize associated with New York. This first person here will have won the $20 and the $40 prizes associated with these 2, which we see in the next step. There's the 20, there's the 40. here are the prizes for the 3 of a kinds. We create these tuples. And again, like I said, this is the randomness. Here's a person who won like $85. And then the next person who also had 8 pieces only got 20. So some good luck, some bad luck. And then we have this list of, did anyone complete the board? There's 11 pieces. These players only got 8, so no, they didn't complete the board. We're gonna do the same thing with people with 20 pieces. Obviously, they're gonna have a lot more 3 of a kinds and a lot more completed groups. So like off the bat, Broadway, Fifth Avenue, there's a Wall Street, Fremont, Tropicana, Las Vegas Boulevard, right? So as you would imagine, if you have 20 pieces, you're gonna complete a lot of more groups and get more 3 of a kinds, and your prize values are gonna be a lot higher. So we translate the pieces to the counts. This is interesting. See, this person, this first player here actually has a non-zero value for every single piece except that one right there. So they're 1 piece away from completing the entire board. And now that I look at it, this next person, whoops, this person right here. Yeah.
So was it cumulative pieces because they have, so if I get New York, do I lose those 3 pieces because then I don't get the 2 3 of a kinds, right?
No, we were sort of like considering those separately. They don't, if you get a 3 of a kind, it doesn't affect your ability to complete the group. Right.
It's much easier to calculate for sure. You don't have to worry about time distribution.
Right. And obviously that would be, again, the idea of the 3 of a kind was to reduce customer, frustration. If we sort of pulled them out, that would increase that frustration. So it's not something we wanted, but yeah, here's somebody who did. He has a non-zero value for every single piece. Again, we translate this into dollars for completing the groups, dollars for the 3 of a kinds. We create these tuples. And again, you can see some of the variation here where $480 compared to just $175. Here's someone with $660. So again, good luck and bad luck. And then again, was the board completed? There's actually 2 people who did, which is higher than I would have expected. And I've run this many times, but that's what happens when you are doing random simulations. So hopefully that was sort of understandable, like the steps that we're taking to validate the prizes and what we're doing in the simulation here, what the whole purpose of it is. We then take the totals that we've calculated, these averages from all the way from 1 to 21. And this, again, this set here is the entirety of our results, okay? For all the people who only are gonna get 1 piece, they can't make a 3 of a kind and they can't complete any of the groups. They can only get a prize if their 1 piece is one of those instant win prizes. So the average is only $2.90 per person, but there's 1,000 of them. So 2,900 is the expected total cost for those 1,000 people. There's 0 chance of them covering the board. And just as a reminder, we did 5,000 simulations. You'll see here, the expected cost is sort of what we're keying in on. And you'll see, like, once you get to 7 and 8 and above, that's where sort of the heart of the dollar amounts are, because you're exceeding, now you're over $10,000 for the group in total. And you'll see that the probability of covering the entire board is non-zero once we get to 13 pieces. But even with getting all 21 pieces, the probability of a single person covering the board are still only 4.8%. So still individually, it's quite low. That's 3.4% for 20. That's why having 2 of the 10 that we selected is more than I would have anticipated. Most of the times it's 0 or sometimes 1. very rarely to get to. But the one other thing we want to calculate is how many other board finishers do we think there will be, because they're going to each earn $2,500. We want to know the probability, given all of these individual probabilities, what's the probability of somebody completing the board? This is the math formula for it. Right here is the same code in Python. But our total expected cost, we can calculate now from here by summing up all these the individual expected costs, plus the $50,000 grand prize, plus the how many 2,500s we expect to give out. Here's the probability of at least one winner, and we can see the results. 264,000 or 265, we round, and about a 99.5% chance of somebody completing the board. And we expect there would be 4 additional people to do it. We also know we're going to need about 26,000 game pieces, and here are the individual number of game pieces. So we can send this to our printer and say, this is how many of each piece we'd like you to print out. Right now, we said in the beginning we had a budget of 300,000, so this is lower than we want. So this is what I was talking about earlier, where we're going to iterate. So we can do some things like we can raise some of the prize values, 300 maybe, and 150, let's say, and we can run the game again. And again, because we're only doing 5,000 simulations, it's going to be quick. And the precision is still pretty high. And then just by doing that, okay, we got a game with a budget of about 303,000. And again, because we're doing everything randomly, there's no, it's not like precise. If I don't make any changes and just rerun the game, so right now 303, I'm not making any changes, just rerunning it. And 302, 900. So the idea is like this isn't a mathematical equation where we get an exact answer, but the 5,000 simulations make sure that any like weird outliers are sort of just averaged in there. So like we have a game configuration that's pretty good. It's right on our 300,000 budget. I can go back up and create a different game configuration, say, that doubles the prize of getting 3 of a kind. Let's see here. Make these instant prizes a little bit easier to earn. Maybe make that Rodeo Drive a little bit more difficult to obtain. And let's see how that affects things. Okay, so now like we're 21,000 over the budget. We got a 321. So the idea would be like we go back, maybe tweak this. Maybe we didn't make it different. Maybe this should be like 1.5. Maybe this Las Vegas should be only 125. So like I said, we're just iterating a few times, rerunning the simulation, trying to find a handful of configurations that we can go back to the marketing team and say, hey, here's some different options. What do you think? And so we're back at 303. So I'm satisfied with that. We still have a 97% chance of somebody winning the game. So that's a little tricky, right? Because I don't want someone to win the game too early. Like I said earlier, once someone wins the 50,000, some of the excitement is over. So I actually don't want the probability to be like 99.9%, because that means someone's probably going to win in like only the 4th or 5th, I guess not the 4th, but like the 5th day, as opposed to like the 6th or the 7th day. And in real life, we had a longer game. So I actually don't want a target that's at like 99.9%. I actually am willing to take like a 2% chance of nobody winning to increase the likelihood that someone wins on the final day, and the excitement of the game continues to build throughout. So as we've adjusted the ratios, our piece numbers change. And again, we can, we have all the values to go to the printer and say, hey, these are the printouts of the game pieces that we need. And it's real easy. I'm going to kind of skip over this, but one thing that's super important anytime you're utilizing randomness in terms of a computer program is to make sure your randomness is valid. Fortunately, we're using Python, so it's pretty reliable. We know that it is, but when I count the number of pieces of the entirety of our simulation, that there was over 1,100,000 pieces that were randomly chosen. And proportionately, though, you can see by this graph, like it's all basically even. So, yeah. This is the board that our casino actually used, at least during one of the runs. You can see we had 5 color groups. We had 5 instant win prizes. We had prizes of $500 and $1,000. Our budget was $1 million, and we were running for 21 days. And we allowed people to get 6 game pieces on the final day. But you can imagine, right? Again, if the model was off and we were giving out $1,000 more frequently than we had anticipated, then we could have found ourselves, in a real bind very quickly. What actually happened was the total prizes that were awarded turned out to be within 2% of what we had budgeted and within 2% of what our model had anticipated, right? Our grand prize winner did occur on the final day of the promotion. And it really did have like an electricity at the casino those last few days, not just among the players, but the employees too. We were all rooting for the individual players. Like anyone who had 19 of the 20, people were really like rooting them on to like get that last piece to win the 50,000. And everybody was asking, did it happen yet? Did it happen yet? The players, they started coming like first thing in the morning because they didn't want to get beat. They wanted to get they wanted to earn their pieces early as possible. I was freaking out a little bit, to be completely honest, because I had built this model. I had faith that the model was going to come through. But again, until somebody actually won it, there was still the possibility that we would go and the game would end without having that winner. So when it finally happened, it was like really cool to see your whole model come out and be realized. And the same thing with the prize amounts, right? The final day, we gave out a lot of prizes, partly because we were giving away 6 game pieces, but also because, by the end of the game, lots of people had 2 out of the 3 in each group. So the last day was the highest prize amounts. So again, I'm hoping that this whole thing ends up and validates the model. But until we got to the end, I was not sure that it would, so it was very interesting. And it was actually very cool. It was pretty exciting. And it was successful so much that the casino ended up running the same exact promotion a whole bunch of times. There's 2015 3 times, 2016, 2017, 2019, they brought it back. And I haven't been with this casino for a while, but they have the math. They know the math that works, right? We did vary the game a little bit the first couple times, but so they have a few configurations that they're happy with. They don't need me to keep running the model for something that they already know that works. So I just want to finish up by saying this whole presentation is just a single application of one use of Python inside a casino resort. Just like at any company, there's tons of applications, tons of uses. And, like I said, this is just one, but being an analytics guy, being involved with data visualization and things, I've found Python to be invaluable tool in lots of projects, lots of applications. And as I consult, I start to see other casinos, realizing the same thing. And again, having the whole ecosystem where like Python is, sort of the go-to language for things like AI, machine learning. We're starting to see more advanced stuff get built as well. So I appreciate everyone who came and who listened through this whole thing. Like I said, I'm more than happy to take some questions now, but if you have some other questions after the fact, you can just email me. I'll be happy to talk you through it or walk through the code line by line, whatever. At the bottom are links to this presentation, and in the middle of it is a link to the actual Jupyter notebook, which you can download it, copy it, play with it, build your own game, whatever you want to do with it. Just let me know if you're doing that. It'd be cool to see like someone else using it. So that's it. Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, somebody. Any questions?
I actually have a question. This was at the Parks Casino, wasn't it, in Pennsylvania?
Yes, it was.
Okay, so that's a locals casino, and you're going to get a lot of people are going to keep coming back into that casino. How would you make it? How would you make a change for something like Las Vegas, where you have people coming in for 3 days at a time, and then they leave? So if they come in the middle of the promotion, they really don't have much of a chance. But I was more curious, not what you would do to change that in a situation like Las Vegas.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting, like what you said. It's sort of the same thing. It is a local Parks and Locals casino, right? But again, to win that grand prize, especially in the real game where you had to get 20 game pieces covered over the course of 3 weeks, it was obvious that only sort of the highest VIP players were going to have a chance of earning that many pieces. So the same thing that you just described, lots of players who are not coming to the casino every day, maybe they only visit once a week, they are not going to win the grand prize.
Okay.
That was part of the reason of having so many possible color groups and prizes to be won, so that even if you realize you're not going to win the 50,000, you could win $500, you could win $1,000. So actually, in the case, like you just said, of visitors to Las Vegas, I would think that it would actually be pretty effective to kind of use the same game configuration, because they may only have one chance, like only one visit to Las Vegas, but they're going to be concentrated. Like you just said, they're going to be there 3 days in a row, for example. So it's actually a great promotion to keep them at your casino, right? If you're, say, Caesar's Palace and you're running this casino, a good way to keep them at Caesar's is to have a promotion like this that gives them an incentive to get some game groups, as opposed to take their play to the MGM, during one or two of the days of the visit.
Well, that's what but I also know that Parks is the only casino there. So if you want to play in a casino,
right,
that's the only place you can go.
Right. Just to be clear, it's there's like 11 casinos, I think, in Pennsylvania, but geographically speaking, it's about 30 to 40 minutes to the next one.
Okay.
So it's not completely isolated. It's just north of Philadelphia. There's another one in Philadelphia.
It's in Bucks County.
Correct. Right. And, so there's a couple other casinos around, but yes, you're correct. The players tend to be very loyal. The idea of the promotion was to get people, not so much to get new players, although we got some, but to get people who are coming, say, once a week to come twice a week, or to play, if they're coming twice a week, to come a third time a week, or just to play a little bit more in the visits that they're already having, so that they earn all 3 game pieces in a day. So yeah.
No, I wasn't questioning the math or anything.
No,
I wasn't questioning anything. I mean, I really like the approach that was taken. Um, it was just that in this kind of a case, it works in this case, but what would you have to do? And I guess maybe it's even outside the scope of Python, but what you would have to do in a case of Las Vegas that has all these casinos
Right.
and you have a dilution, people, first time visitors come in, they want to see every casino. And you have some people who are very loyal to some casinos, but
But
I
you
was,
do
I
have that, I
was,
think, in Las Vegas with local casinos, right? Because you've got
you do, yeah,
station
Right.
casinos, right? And so, like, hey, any station casino, pick up a game piece.
right,
So,
right.
So, I mean, yeah,
And
yeah, I
air it
mean,
on TV.
right. It's, I mean, you're asking like marketing questions, which are very valid.
Well, yeah, but yeah,
Yeah. I mean, again, that's why you don't see casinos run too many sort of like long-term promotions.
mhm,
Most casino promotions are like a single day, earn 100 points and you get a
yeah,
free buffet or a gift or something like that. The idea of doing something that runs for a week or 3 weeks is sort of a little bit unusual. And that's
yeah,
what,
because people would lose interest and,
Mhm.
yeah,
but so this ran for about 7 days, is that right?
it ran for about 21 days. Yeah, it was a 3-week promotion.
That's awesome. You know what?
Yeah,
Be honest with you, the way you did it in Jupiter as a notebook and everything, you did the well documentation. That could have actually been a whole class. Believe it or not. Believe it or not, from like the business case and showing people how it's done, and your results, you could actually ran a whole class off of that. Believe it or not.
Cool. That's
I
really
think you
appreciate
could
saying
have.
that. That's awesome. Thank you.
You could have had a whole
I mean-
class and had everybody interested in it.
Yeah, no, that's great. I hope you guys got the links. I'm gonna stop the sharing so I can see and just say that that is very cool and I appreciate that.
So one question I have is, when you first did this, so this is a while ago, what was the thing you learned about Python that you didn't know in that exercise?
Yeah, so that's actually an interesting question. So I mentioned the random choices function. That was beautiful because, like I said, it just it was like it was handwritten for this exact scenario, right? So it was much better than building like an Excel randomness model where it's just all you get are decimal numbers and you or get mapping things to the results. I guess part of it was like like again the speed, realizing the fact that I was able to do this, like run the whole iteration multiple times during this presentation, it's like boom, super fast. Again, like an Excel model like this would take not forever, but it would take a lot longer to run. You'd be sitting there, have time to go, get a cup of coffee or go get lunch or something like that. The fact you're just able to iterate very quickly is helpful. And again, I guess the fact that I didn't actually have to use pandas was kind of interesting. I guess sort of by default, I just assumed, my first thing when I started typing was like import pandas as PD. And then I realized, wait, what am I going to actually use a data frame for here? As long as I have, a list of lists, that's essentially all I'm going to need. And so those are a couple of things, I guess. Yeah. I'm sure there's other stuff too along the way. Getting those list comprehensions was tricky. I definitely for sure.
And you documented very well. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, I mean, I do know that, yeah, I mean, anytime you follow someone's code, it's tricky. In this case, it's even more tricky because you're like, what, I even understand the code, but like, what's the whole purpose of this particular line or this thing that we're doing? So, well, I'm glad that you found it well documented. I appreciate that. Thanks. I see on the chat, where did I get stumped during this project? That's a good question. Well, I just mentioned the list comprehensions, right? So I do think I sort of challenged myself. You're right. I could have written some of those nested list comprehensions as like for loops. right? When I was trying to make a flat list of all the street names, for example. And definitely like, I guess I just made a personal challenge, like list comprehensions are Pythonic. That's how I want to write this code. And there were plenty of times though when like they're like 3 levels deep. And I was sitting there like bashing my head against the thing to be like, wait, this is flipping it all around. I'm trying to get a flat list, and it's, you know, it's giving me numbers instead of word. You know, it was just all crazy. So again, I didn't really have to go down that path, but I chose to, and that was definitely tricky. I'm sure I'm skipping over something else. Yeah, I guess just even just coming up with the idea of like the ratios, for example. Like initial thought would be, I'm going to assume 1,000 pieces, and so I'll have 100 of this piece, 50 of this piece, you know, 75 of another piece, and I realized that's a problem because every time I make something, every time I change one ratio, I'm going to have to change all the others to get back to exactly, you know, 1,000 pieces. So every time something goes up, I had to take it away from somewhere else. Whereas just by using the concept of ratios, I could just change a ratio and everything else sort of automatically adjusts. So that was sort of something that I guess, you know, took a while to sort of like realize that that's how I ought to do this. How is distribution expected players determined? Yeah. So again, it's mostly looking at historical gaming data. You know, fortunately, casinos keep track of all their players. You know, when you have a player's card, you know, like one of these, and you put it in the slot machine. Obviously, everything is being recorded. How much you play, how long you played, which games, how much you won or lost. So we know like hours that people play and how frequently they visit. So we have that data. The problem is just because someone played that way last month doesn't mean they're going to do it this month. And of course, also last month we had different set of promotions. So someone might have been incented to visit last month because we were giving away a different prize that was appealing to them, and that this game maybe is not so appealing. So in some cases, we have to recognize that some people's play is going to go down, and some people's play goes down naturally, and a lot of people's play is highly volatile. Howard, you mentioned this is a locals casino, so it's actually a little more predictable than a Las Vegas casino where someone may come once a year or something like that. But it's still pretty volatile. So it's really just mining that data, making some assumptions on how many people are going to be boosted their level of play, how many people are going to sort of decline a little bit, and making your best case scenario and trying to figure it out. I mean, again, we have the data. There's, you know, more that we spent time looking at, or I spent time looking at. The other thing was looking at the volatility, right? So like in this example that I did here, I assumed there were 40 players that would get the full 21 pieces. So the other thing I wanted to know is, well, if that's actually 50 players, how much of a variation in the budget? So where are my like peak vulnerabilities? Because the people who play the most are the ones who are going to win the most prizes. So getting those numbers wrong, and those are small numbers, like I said, only 40 players. So the difference between 40 and 50 is hard to predict, but I could be giving away, you know, 10% more prize money to those players. So there's no science, just a lot of like historical data and taking a guess.
Yeah, that was kind of what I had assumed, was that you had historical data to go off of, that this wasn't just, you know, a data set forecasted in a vacuum. So no, thank you for that. This was an awesome presentation. Thank you so much for this, really insightful. But yeah, it does kind of, it reminds me of an issue then that I've seen pop up. I've heard other people voice with more online gaming, more companies like William Hill, companies like GAN,
Yeah.
as real money gaming start to try to implement, I'll call it almost like a reward, kind of like a rewards game like this. One of the things they look at is TOD, time on device.
Right.
And with situations like this, you can actually make an app or make a game that's too sticky, that people, it almost does too good of a job of having people play. If you wanted, like you said, in your distribution or in your, I think it was like winner, probability of winner by day 3 versus by day 7.
Right.
They're having a trouble, scaling that up as they increase the number of players added per day. So the unique situation. Thank you for that.
No, definitely. Yeah. Thanks. That's very interesting, actually. I mean, I'm aware of some of the things that these online casinos are doing, but obviously there's so many, they're proliferating. Can't keep track of everything in this space. So that's pretty cool. I'll have to go check it out. Yeah.
Unmute myself. Awesome. Any more questions?
Yeah.
All right. So I will stop recording because the rest is going to get boring.